Hello again, it's Ben from Musings here, once more on the subject of guns and gun control, which I know for an Englishman talking about America might seem a bit strange. However, I have got friends in America and I remain baffled by the perspective of some Americans, especially the ones whom I've had arguments with, as to why guns are the object of worship that they seem to be. Now, to my view, a gun is a deadly weapon, and it's designed to be a deadly weapon. Its one purpose is to take life, and it is also very, very good at that purpose. That's what it's made to do. Let's not beat around the bush here. A gun is a tool for taking life. Yes, you can use other things, but it's a lot easier with a weapon designed for that purpose than it is with other objects. And yet you'll continue to see the argument, as I have seen more than once on Twitter and online elsewhere as well, that, if you take away guns, people will just use knives or baseball bats or their fists or their cars or blah, 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 blah. Yes, people might try, but it's a lot easier to kill with a weapon designed for that purpose than with something not designed for that purpose. This might explain why, in the USA last year, something like 71% of all US homicides involved a firearm of some description. 71%. Now in 2012, that number was 60%, which is still more than half, of course, but it seems like the usage of guns in homicides in the USA has increased, and the US homicide rate continues to be higher than our rate over here. Now, why is that? Could it have something to do with the ease of access to weapons designed for that very purpose? You'd think so, wouldn't you? But in the eyes of some of the people that I've argued with, apparently, first of all, we shouldn't be focusing on homicide. We should be focusing on overall violent crime, which has allegedly increased in the UK since we banned guns. Although I say ban guns, we haven't banned guns. You can still get guns here in the UK. It's a popular misconception that you can't. You actually can. It's just there are much tighter rules and regulations around getting them. In terms of violent crime, well, first of all, homicide is arguably the most violent of all violent crimes. So why this is somehow not included when discussing violent crime, I don't know. And second of all, there's not actually any evidence to suggest the UK is inherently more violent than the USA. And this also goes to other countries as well, where there are more robust forms of gun control. Take, for example, France and Germany. I'm not saying these countries are perfect, not by a long shot. Yes, there are some problems in some areas of these countries, and the same goes for elsewhere as well. However, these countries, once again, have introduced different types of gun control means, and what they both have is a much lower homicide rate than the ones you currently see in the USA. The same goes for the UK, the same goes for Australia, the same goes for Canada, the same goes for Japan, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. You've got several developed countries that have taken steps to reduce gun crime and gun deaths, and they have succeeded. Why? Because unlike what happens in the USA, these countries have decided to tackle these problems. In the UK, for example, we had the Dunblane tragedy in 1996. Touch wood, since then we have not had a repeat of that incident. There have been a handful of mass shootings in Germany over the past few years, which is nothing compared to what happens in America. And the homicide rates in these nations in total, forget with guns alone, in total are lower than the US homicide rate using only guns. So it goes to show what happens when you actually do stop and think objectively, and you take the time to introduce methods and ideas to tackle gun violence and gun deaths. you can actually have a measurable positive impact on these problems. But you speak to some Americans, and not all Americans, I hasten to add, but you speak to some of them online in particular, and you can usually work out pretty quickly where their allegiances lie. And they equate control straight away with bans and with taking away of freedom. They will insist that if you live in a country with gun regulations, you're not actually free, because to them, the right to own deadly weapons is a symbol of freedom. It's quite scary, actually. I mean, why is it that an object like a gun, an object which exists purely for a very violent purpose, is treated as a cultural symbol, and a very powerful one at that? It's moved beyond the idea of self-defense. It's almost become a cultural icon, one to be treasured rather than treated with the respect that it should have. And that's highly disturbing, if you ask me. And yet I continue to see people argue that, guns don't kill people, people kill people. In one sense, yes, that's true. But it's a lot easier for a person to kill another person with an AR-15 assault rifle than it is with their fists. And you can kill a lot of people with an assault rifle in one go, as we have tragically seen again and again in the USA. And even if you forget the assault rifles, the vast majority of homicides in the USA, if you looked at a single percentage, involve pistols, firearms like that. So there is a problem there, a problem which isn't being faced. It's being ignored in the hope it will go away. This is the mindset of what I tend to think of as the conservative religious right, especially in America. Ignore the problem in the hope it goes away, or do nothing about the problem and hope it will change, or do more of the same thing in the hope that the problem will go away. Now, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome, that's the very definition of either insanity or stupidity, depending on what your perspective is. You cannot expect serious change. You cannot expect to actually resolve these issues by doing nothing or by doing exactly what's been done before. And yet, to the conservative religious right, that's seemingly what they expect to see happen. And then they get very, very agitated when younger people, as we've seen through this March for Life, and by the way, I have to applaud these kids, they're the ones taking the initiative. They're the ones who, unlike a lot of the old cronies sitting around in the US political establishments right now, are actually trying to enact real change, meaningful change. They're the ones that are trying to look after themselves and protect their futures, so that when they go to school, they're not facing the possibility of death. They're not having to practice drills in case of armed shooters in the building. They're trying to ensure that schools are safe places, and the best answer that the conservative right has to that question is to put more guns in schools. Arm the teachers, have armed guards in there. Yes, that's the only solution you've got. Then in my view, quite frankly, you've already failed. Schools are a place of learning, not a place that should be armed. If you're at the point in your society where the only solution you can possibly offer to the problem of gun crime and mass shootings is to put more guns into the equation, then you have, as a society, already failed. You've already failed your duty of care to these kids by doing nothing. And in the case of some people, you're actually insulting them by false comparisons to the Tide Pod generation and all that kind of poisoning of the well stuff that I've seen online as well. It's an absolute joke, to be honest. Face facts. In countries with gun control measures, not necessarily bans, because that's another popular misconception, a popular lie, actually, put forward by the conservative right, gun control measures have been demonstrated to work. In countries where they've introduced them, you've seen an impact on gun deaths. The fact that 71% of homicides in the USA last year involved guns goes to show that continuing to allow zero regulations, zero controls, isn't working. The problem is just going to continue. Why let it continue? Why not actually try to do something? Not every problem will work, of course, but doing nothing will never work. When there's a problem, doing nothing will either see the problem continue in the same way or even get worse. I've never known an issue like that to disappear by doing nothing or by trying the same failed solution over and over again. It's absolutely baffling.